I am Patrick Beggs with the Division of Water Resources, and I want to tell you about nutrient management strategies. So North Carolina has a set of watershed-specific nutrient management strategies, and buffers are a part of these strategies. So I want to give you an overview of where we have nutrient management strategies, explain a little bit about what they entail, share which of them include buffers, because they don't all. And in addition, a survey this past year identified a couple items that I can clarify for you at the end of the year, at the end of the presentation. So first, why do we have nutrient management strategies? The earliest ones go back to the 80s. The impacts of excess nutrients on our waters required us to develop them. The impacts of excess nutrients include fish kills, overproduction of algae, and generally reduced ecosystem benefits downstream, whether that is in a lake, in a river, or in the estuaries. So problems in the estuaries is what initially prompted nutrient management strategies. Another problem related to algae production is the impact on drinking water and the need for water treatment plants to remove it. And it can produce toxins that are harmful to breathing and also affect fishing and swimming and just general bodily contact, including for pets. So all of these impacts affect environmental, social, and economic components for North Carolina. So I mentioned these strategies are watershed specific, right? That might be an entire river basin like the Neuse or Tar Pamlico. It might be just a specific smaller river like the New River in the White Oak River Basin, or the watershed of a lake, which is the rest of these here: Falls, Jordan, Randleman, and High Rock. But I want to specifically point out that High Rock Lake does not yet have a nutrient management strategy, but we are planning for one. And that's in the Yadkin PD. And so earlier, Sue mentioned that we don't have a buffer program in the Yadkin PD, but it may come into play with the High Rock nutrient management strategy. So the goal of the strategies is to control nutrients at their sources. And this is authorized from the Clean Water Act and by state statutes. So trying to remove nutrients once they reach their destination is largely ineffective and contrary to these laws. So an example of this is the Jordan Lake solar bees from a few years ago. If you remember them, they didn't work and they actually go against these laws. So one more thing to note about this map. I mentioned that buffers can be a part of these strategies, but buffers can be present without these strategies. So Goose Creek and Catawba River, the map that you saw earlier, are examples of buffer programs that do not have a nutrient management strategy or are not a part of it either. So they're not on this map. The reverse is also true. The Chowan and the New River, which are our earliest strategies, they don't have buffer rules. Okay, so potential elements of nutrient management strategies include wastewater permits. So basically point sources and non-point sources. So point sources are wastewater permits. Non-point sources are agricultural runoff strategies, riparian buffer strategies, stormwater management, runoff, including new development and existing development. So new development is from changes in land use and runoff due to development, of course. Existing development is concerned with that stormwater that we just never really dealt with in the past, but it's there. And then offsets and trading. This is a part of the strategy which allows an option of doing work in a different area of the watershed where it is easier, more cost effective to implement, and sometimes the only place that it's available to do anything, given the development that's occurring. So all of these strategies are meant to change over time. And there's this great quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson that I see as a description of adaptive management. The quote is, "The voyage of the best ship is a zigzag line of 100 tacks. We see the line from a sufficient distance and it straightens itself out to the average tendency." So that's what I think the best science and the best decision making and the best management, adaptive management, can do, is set its sights on something and then continue to fix it as we move along, as we get more information. All right, so I'll just go through these strategies. The Chowan and the New. In these, there's no buffer rules. Like I said, these were early. These started in the 80s. They don't have all the elements that I mentioned. They don't have non-point source rules. Sometimes we try to figure out if we can seek voluntary measures for this. Data collection continues. We're still struggling with excess algal production again now, especially in the Chowan. The Chowan, you'll notice, goes way up into Virginia, and we do work with the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Program works in concert with Virginia to do a lot of work, since all that water comes to us. Both of these really need revisiting and adaptation. The Tar-Pamlico and the Neuse, these were readopted in the spring of 2020, and the buffer rules for these were readopted earlier. The Falls Lake Watershed has its own nutrient management strategy that's separate from the Neuse nutrient management strategy, but it doesn't have its own buffer rules. So everything in the falls falls within the Neuse buffer rules. The Falls Lake rules are scheduled to begin readoption in 2024. And right now they're undergoing a 3-year study, a lot of other work, but specifically a 3-year study with the North Carolina Policy Collaboratory leading that. That came about from legislation a few years ago. Jordan has a nutrient management strategy. It includes buffer rules. You heard a few times saying that the Jordan buffer rules have yet to be readopted with the others. That's because legislation put them to be readopted with the rest of the Jordan nutrient strategy rules. That began this year, last year, 2020. The North Carolina Policy Collaboratory did a 3-year study, some other studies going on. Modeling that started with that study is continuing and will go through all of this year. So of all of the Jordan nutrient management rules, basically the ones that were delayed were the stormwater rules, the new development and the existing development stormwater rules. All the others are still in effect: wastewater, agriculture, buffers. Randleman Lake Watershed has a nutrient management strategy, which includes buffers, and its rule readoption became effective in June 2020. And like Jordan, the buffer rules are implemented by local governments. High Rock Lake Watershed is planned to receive a nutrient management strategy. It's had a lot of studies performed in anticipation of a strategy. The modeling has been done. Both watershed nutrient delivery and lake nutrient response modeling has been completed. The next step is nutrient criteria rulemaking. And we have an initial rule drafted and expected to go to the EMC, the Environmental Management Commission, this spring. That will allow a nutrient management strategy rulemaking to start once we have that nutrient criteria rulemaking in place. And of course, that will take easily another 2 to 3 years. We're not really sure yet if it will include buffers. I would expect it to. Okay, so there was a survey sometime in the past year that maybe went out to a bunch of folks, to you. And one of the issues mentioned by respondents was the confusion between NSW, nutrient sensitive waters, and NMS, nutrient management strategies. Because it's government, we just have tons of acronyms. Everybody does. So a nutrient management strategy is a program approved by the EMC, the Environmental Management Commission, to help alleviate excess nutrient inputs. NSW, nutrient sensitive waters, is a surface water classification. And the definition is here: supplemental surface water classification intended for waters needing additional nutrient management due to their being subject to excessive growth or microscopic or macroscopic vegetation. The NSW classification is not required to develop a nutrient management strategy. Randleman doesn't have an NSW classification. High Rock Lake doesn't have a nutrient sensitive waters NSW classification either. Basically, the NSW classification is viewed as a previously listed unnecessary procedural step, because the EMC has since been given explicit legislative authority to develop restoration strategies to address impaired waters. Long story short, you just don't have to worry about the phrase NSW. That's pretty much it. And the other item that came up in a survey, people asked about the SNAP tool. So the SNAP, Stormwater Nutrient and Phosphorus Tool, this is a project scale tool for estimating nitrogen and phosphorus in stormwater runoff from a development site, and the nutrient reductions provided by a specific stormwater treatment. So the SNAP tool only applies to new development and existing development stormwater rules, and it's not used for nutrient accounting with buffers at all. And in what you get from the webinar, I will have a link in there. But if you search NC DWR SNAP tool, you'll get to the page with it if you want more information about it. So that's what I wanted to share about nutrient management strategies.